When we think about Chicago pizza, we think about deep dish pizza. Kenji López-Alt did a video on Tavern-style Chicago thin crust pizza, which is just as popular in the Midwest. Hey guys, it's your girl Michelle. This weekend we're making Tavern-style Chicago thin crust pizza. We're not just making one, not two, but 3 different types of recipes. Of course, we have to try Kenji López-Alt's recipe that he published in the New York Times recently. What's very interesting about his recipe is that he has you cure the dough by rolling it out and leaving it uncovered overnight. Then we're going to try Tony Gemignani's recipe from the Pizza Bible. Everything in this book is delicious, so I'm very excited to try his thin crust pizza. Last but not least, we're going to try America's Test Kitchen recipe, which was inspired by Vito and Nick's Pizzeria, which was also mentioned in Kenji López-Alt's article. I heard so many great things about this restaurant being one of the best Chicago thin crust pizza. Hopefully I have the honor of trying their pizza one day. Without further ado, we got a lot of work to do. Let's get started.
Let's start with Kenji López-Alt's recipe first. I'm using Kenji's 2 12-inch pizza recipes so it'll fit in my Breville Pizzaiolo. If you want to make 2 14-inch pizzas, then I'll put the measurements in the description box below. I'll also add a link to Kenji's video as well. In a food processor, add 225 grams of bread flour, 5 grams of sugar, 5 grams of salt, 1 gram or 1/4 teaspoon of instant yeast. Give it a pulse. Add 115 grams of cold water, 22.5 grams of oil. Run the food processor until the dough forms a ball. Run for an additional 30 seconds. Knead the dough and form a ball. Making the dough in the food processor decreases gluten development and keeps the pizza crust thin and crispy. Divide the dough into 2 and form the doughs into balls. Place it in an oiled container or tray. Cover and refrigerate for 3 to 5 days. Kenji says it's best to leave it in for 5 days. I left my dough in the fridge for 3 days. Dust your working surface with semolina flour and roll the dough out into 12-inch circles. You can roll the dough straight out of the fridge, but it will roll easier if you leave it out at room temperature for 1 hour or so. Place the rounds onto a parchment paper and let it sit overnight uncovered. Preheat your oven with a pizza stone to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to set my Breville Pizzaiolo to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. This pizza dough feels like a corn tortilla. It feels kind of brittle, so I have to be gentle with it. I'm going to dust the bottom of the crust with more semolina flour to prevent it from sticking. I'm just going to make a simple cheese pizza so I can taste the dough more. Bake for 10 minutes or so. This pizza is super thin. The bottom came out nice and golden brown. It tastes and feels like a soft cracker. It's airy and crispy. I probably can eat the whole pizza and not feel full. Tony's recipe requires a Poolish. In a small bowl or a measuring cup, add a pinch of active dry yeast, 47 grams of cold water, give it a stir, then add 47 grams of all-purpose flour. Mix the ingredients together, cover, and let it sit at room temperature for 18 hours. When the Poolish is ready, stick it in the refrigerator for 30 minutes before using. Let's make the dough. In a small bowl or measuring cup, add 70 grams of water, room temperature, 3/4 teaspoon of active dry yeast. Stir and set aside. In a stand mixer bowl, add 430 grams of all-purpose flour, 23 grams of cornmeal, medium grind, 10 grams of diastatic malt. Give the dry ingredients a stir. With the mixer running on low, add 210 grams of ice water, then the yeast water. Run for about 15 seconds. Scrape the bowl down and add the Poolish. Run the mixer for roughly 1 minute, then scrape the bowl down. Add 10 grams of salt and mix for roughly 3 minutes until combined. Transfer the dough onto your working surface and knead until smooth. Cover and let the dough rest for 20 minutes. Divide the dough into 3 and shape them into balls. Place the dough balls in an oiled container or plate. Cover and let them rest in the fridge for 24 to 48 hours. Take the doughs out and let them rest at room temperature for 1 hour. Preheat your pizza oven to 500 degrees Fahrenheit 1 hour before baking time. Dust your working surface with semolina flour. Coat the dough and roll out into circles. Use your pizza cutter to trim the edges into 12 to 13-inch circles. Tony indicates that this creates a flat rim instead of a normal puffed edge pizza, giving it that signature thin crust look. I'm going to use this dough docker to prevent the crust from rising and puffing up. This is one of those gadgets I always forget I have in my drawer, along with a whole bunch of other tools. Place the rolled out dough onto a lightly semolina dusted pizza peel. Top with sauce and topping. Bake for 3 minutes or until golden brown. Mine took a little longer than 3 minutes. This pizza was also very delicious. This pizza dough was a little more flexible and had more of a chew. It was crispy on the bottom, but not as crispy as Kenji's pizza. It kind of reminded me of a Neapolitan pizza and a New York pizza combined together. Let's finally make the America's Test Kitchen and Bryan Roof's recipe. In a food processor, add 12.5 ounces or 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of sugar, 1.5 teaspoons of instant yeast, 1 teaspoon of salt. Run the machine until the ingredients are all combined, roughly 3 seconds. With the food processor running, slowly add 3/4 cups plus 2 tablespoons of cold water, which is roughly around 7 ounces, 2 tablespoons of oil. Run the machine until the dough clears from the side, roughly 30 to 60 seconds. Transfer the dough onto your working surface and knead until smooth, roughly 1 minute. Shape the dough into a ball, place the dough in an oiled bowl, cover, and let it rest at room temperature for 2 to 2.5 hours, or doubled in size. Preheat your pizza zone to 500 degrees Fahrenheit 1 hour before baking. Dust your working surface with semolina flour and divide the dough in half. Shape the doughs into balls. Roll the balls into 12-inch circles. Dock the pizza dough. Place the rolled out dough onto a lightly semolina dusted pizza peel. Top with sauce and topping. Bake for 10 to 14 minutes or until golden brown. This pizza is also very delicious. The bottom is very crispy and is probably the crispiest of all 3 pizzas. It does have a thin layer of fluffy bread on top of the crust. This dough has a lot of flavor, which surprised me because it didn't require a long bulk fermentation time like Kenji's and Tony's recipe. This pizza reminded me of a thin New York style pizza. Here are some comparisons. America's Test Kitchen and Tony's recipe uses all-purpose flour, whereas Kenji uses bread flour. Tony's recipe has the highest hydration, which might be contributing to the chewiness and flexibility. Kenji and Tony's recipe requires a couple of days of bulk fermentation for maximal flavor. Tony's require a Poolish, and Kenji requires dough curing overnight. I saw a video on Munchies where Frank Pinello and a pizza expert were eating pizzas at Vito and Nick's Pizzeria. They said the middle of the pizza is the biggest test because it's an area where it's hard to get crispy. So I cut out the middle pieces of all 3 pizzas to compare. All 3 pizzas have a crispy middle. They were all delicious and oh so very different. Out of the 3, America's Test Kitchen had the crispiest bottom. America's Test Kitchen and Tony's had a little bit of bread body where Kenji's didn't have any. Tony's pizza had a little more chewiness and flexibility. I love all 3 pizzas, and I think it depends on your texture preference. Also, how much time you have is also a factor. If you want to make a pizza the same day, then America's Test Kitchen would be a great recipe to make. That concludes my Tavern-style Chicago thin crust pizza adventure. Thanks for watching, guys. Until next weekend. Bye!